Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the regular December meeting of the Concord Zoning Board of Adjustment. We will be following our usual procedure this evening, which is to say we will take the cases in the order in which they appear in the agenda. We will ask the appellants to come forward, be seated in the chairs to my right, and sworn in, and offer us any testimony that they would like us to hear. We ask that they, if at all possible, confine their testimony to a 10-minute increment. Following that, we will ask the appellants to step down. We will solicit testimony from anyone in the audience who is in favor of the appeal, and then testimony from anyone in the audience who is in opposition to it. After that testimony, we will check in with code enforcement to see if there is anything from their office that bears on the case that we haven't already heard. And then, if there has been any testimony that seems to justify factual clarification, the appellant will have the opportunity to offer such clarification, not new arguments, prior to our closing the public testimony portion of the hearing. Under most circumstances, the board will consider and act on each case before moving on to the next. The first case we have this evening is case 4921, J.P. Irving, LLC, 6 Loudon Road, GWP Gateway Performance District. The applicant wishes to establish a master signage plan and requests a modification to variances granted under case 4198 to include requests for the following variances. Under Article 2869B, permitted building signs, to allow the installation of 8 building signs, each sign with an allowed area not to exceed 65 square feet, for a combined new signage area of up to 520 square feet, which, when added to the existing 85 square feet of signage, will result in 10 signs with a combined sign area of up to 605 square feet, where a maximum of 181 square feet is allowed. And under Article 2867I, signs prohibited under this ordinance, to allow the installation of 8 additional building signs at heights up to approximately 46 feet above grade and above the sills of the third floor windowsills, where signs are not allowed to be placed more than 25 feet above grade or be placed above the sills of the first level of windows above the first story on the same wall. And Article 2869B4, permitted building signs, to allow tenants occupying upper floors and having no building frontage to utilize building signage established under the master signage plan, where only a directory sign of up to 6 square feet placed at the entry door is allowed for property located at 6 Loudon Road in the GWP Gateway Performance District. Who is with us this evening from J.P. Irving? Please come forward. Why don't you have a seat right over here?
Over here?
Yeah, please. May I swear you in?
Sure.
Swear to tell the truth.
I do.
Thank you. Would you identify yourself for the record, please?
I'm John Bisson from the law firm of Cronin, Bisson & Zielinski in Manchester. I'm here representing the owner of the building, J.P. Irving. And as you've indicated, we are here looking for a variance to add some signage to 6 Loudon Road, which I'm assuming you're all familiar with. It's kind of right over there. The issue that the applicant faces is it's kind of a dark, sort of big building in a big parking lot in a sea of other uses. And right now, if you look at this visual that's up here on the screen, the Absolute, Banker's Life, those are the proposed new signs. So what appears there now is just the 6 Loudon Road, which has been recently rehabilitated. So the 6 Loudon Road lettering that is there was actual at the time, but it doesn't appear like that anymore. It's been upgraded.
I can show it to you if you'd like to.
No, that'd be great. So we can have before and after, maybe?
Yeah, I was up in the first one. These photos were taken this morning.
So there's the 6 Loudon.
So the one you showed before, that's an artist?
Well, on the sides it was added, but the 6 Loudon was the actual at the time. So the 6 Loudon language or wording, whatever letters, has been replaced. It's kind of hard to see here, but that's been upgraded, and all of the letters will appear the same if this variance is granted. So when you scroll through these photos that are here, you can see where it's located. You can see that it's kind of hard to see the first 2 floors of the building from any distance because of its location in that significant parking area. You know, you're familiar with the parking area, I'm sure, in the building, so you probably don't need me to go on too deeply about it. It's a large building, currently has, I think, 26 tenants in it. The only approved sign right now, I don't know if you have a photo of that, is the directory sign, which is there. Each of the individual names of the tenants is that 2 feet by 3-inch sort of line. Not the best visual for a building of that size. And so the goal is to try and improve the identification of the building by reference to the tenants. It's obviously a consumer business area, lots of traffic, lots of people coming and going looking for those destinations, and the signage would hopefully help. The proposal is not for any logos, no designs, no funny script or anything like that. It'll all be consistent with the 6 Loudon Road font, if you will, that's there now. It won't be illuminated if I didn't say that. So what they're looking to do is put essentially 2 rows of tenant names on 2 sides of the building, as you can see here. Just so that the sort of larger tenants in the building will be identified. People will be able to find them, know where they are, and perhaps, you know, it'll become a way to direct other people to the building, you know, come to the building that says absolute title, even if you're not absolute title. It'll sort of help in direction and all of that. So sort of aesthetically, that's what it'll look like. Variance, we understand, you know, we have some lifting to do with respect to the ordinance. I don't think it's a lot of a heavy lift. The first thing we have to tell you is that it's not going to be contrary to the public interest, not violate basic objectives of the ordinance. It is in the Gateway Performance District, fair amount of traffic, lots of similar uses out there. This building is a bit of an anomaly because it's clearly the largest one in the area, higher, somewhat shielded. So it seems that identifying the occupants of the building would be consistent with getting people there, enhancing the value and use of these commercial spaces, and obviously making it appealing and consistent with what else is out there. Has to be consistent with the spirit of the ordinance. It's in a zone where the use is allowed. Signage is important to commercial users. I would argue that the existing signage that's there is kind of minimal, in that it's very hard to find the tenants that are there. For the same reason, I think it does substantial justice. It improves not only the draw to the building, but helps with traffic and getting people where they belong and knowing which building they're going to. We're trying to make it and keep its reputation as a Class A commercial space, which is important. During the pandemic, you know, we've referenced this in our materials, the commercial space has sort of softened a bit, and making sure that we attract and keep commercial tenants in these large commercial properties is important. Signage is obviously a big draw to commercial people. We don't see it as having any significant value impact on anyone or anybody else in the area. And finally, the hardship criteria, we have to show that there's no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose of the ordinance as it applies to this building and that the proposal is reasonable. It seems to me that they could, I suppose, have asked for more signage. They've tried to limit it to just the upper levels, those 2 floors above, which are the ones that can be seen from around, and all the letters are consistent with each other, not lighting, not making it crazy, trying to make it compatible with the neighborhood. So that's my approach in about 5 minutes. Any questions?
Yes, Mr. Bisson, where would the ground sign go?
The ground sign would stay where it is, the existing 2-post pylon sign.
But now that's the third item on here?
The third item.
Am I misunderstanding this?
maybe, so. what-
Permitted building signs to allow tenants occupying upper floors to utilize a building signage established under the Massage signage plan where only a directory sign, is that the ground sign, or is the ground?
So the existing sign is the 6 square feet directory sign at the entrance door, which is shown there.
Okay, so
And will
that's
be-
not subject to the variance then?
That will not be relocated, won't be affected in any way.
So that's an existing sign and that's in compliance?
Correct. And what it does is it just says everybody that's there
All right, so the only signs we're concerned about are the ones you're proposing for the side of the building.
on either side, 2 sides. Which is how you get to 8. It's 4 tenants, but 1 on each side.
I understand. Questions from the board? Ted?
What's it like to put 6 Loudon Road into a GPS to find it?
Good question. I didn't do that.
Well, yeah, but I mean, nowadays, don't we want to know that? Isn't that the way 90% of people would try to find this address?
Well, I mean, I guess we could put it in now. I don't
I mean,
know.
would it take you there without getting lost?
I think the
without
problem
needing-
is-
Without needing signs that huge?
I think the problem is it brings you to that whole area because of where the building is located in the parking lot. It's sort of off to the back and shielded by these other buildings. And where, if you're looking for any of the tenants there, that's the only indication that's there. So if you put in any of those tenants on your GPS, I assume it will just bring you generally to the entrance off of Loudon Road. You know how you come off Loudon Road and it's a big sea of pavement, and then there's other buildings there. So I guess I'm not sure. I don't know the
Well, I
answer.
mean, I confess years ago, I once had trouble finding that building. But nowadays, it seems to me that it's a lot easier to find buildings, and we don't need huge signs to locate buildings so much anymore because we all have phones.
Well, that's certainly one of the reasons for a sign, is to get people there. But the other thing that it does is it enhances the space value for the tenants that are there, because the tenants want to be known. They want to have a location. They want to be visually there. And any of the businesses that you see trying to come to town want a flag, right? They want people to know that they're there. So beyond making sure that the tenants can get there, there is certainly that I'm here aspect of a sign. And these are not, I mean, the letters are large, but given the size of the building, and when you look at the visual, they're not illuminated. There's no strange script or pictures or, somebody's head up in lights. Visually, they all sort of match what's already there. I suppose you can certainly say they're large, but as a matter of proportion to the building, I think they're appropriately sized.
Thank you.
Other questions? Yes.
So it looks like from the page here, there's about 25 total tenants. Does that sound about right?
I think it's 26 if you
Okay.
count.
But, so obviously you're not gonna have a sign for,
No.
yeah. So,
And it would be up to the landlord, the owner,
to decide who.
as part of the negotiation with the tenants, which one has sort of naming rights on the building.
So if I understand, it's been a little while since we've done one of these, you don't need a variance for the specific number of different signs, it's just the total square footage can't exceed. You can divide it up any way you want, right?
The proposal is for that visual. I believe you're correct, though. I don't think that the plan is not to divide the 605 into 12 signs, if we wanted to, and make them smaller. It's to follow that visual.
Any other questions?
I have a question. I'm guessing you might not know the answer to this, though, but that building was originally the Christian Mutual Insurance Company, and what was the signage on the building then?
I have no idea. You're right about that.
I think it just said 6 Loudon Road.
Yeah.
No, I'm pretty sure it said Christian Mutual on it, but that's,
Oh, maybe it did?
yeah.
Okay.
And I'm assuming the tenants who get the signage will pay more for that?
I would assume, typically,
So-
yes.
so-
It's usually, in my experience with other commercial, it's very common now in Manchester, if you notice in the mill yards, if anybody goes down there, they have the gold lettering on the face of the mill. And so it's usually the ones that have the larger spaces. So yes, they pay more, it's negotiated.
So it would increase the value of the building?
Presumably increases the value of the spot. in the building, and yes, the building.
Okay, thanks.
Other questions before the board? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here who would like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone here who would like to be heard in opposition to it? I do have a memorandum, which probably this is the right time to introduce. This is to the board concerning sign applications in general, and this particular one is also mentioned, from Carlos Bahia, who is the Deputy City Manager for Development, who points out that he is concerned on behalf of the city with the appellant is proposing a sign at 6 Loudon Road with multiple tenant building signs, which could, in our estimation, create an untenable precedent for many remaining office buildings in our community. He then goes on in the memo to discuss the history of the city with electronic messaging signs. This does not involve electronic messaging, although we will hear a case later in the evening that does. And he talks about the city having spent considerable time and expense to go up through the Superior and Supreme Courts to defend its prohibition of electronic messaging signs. We'll come back to that issue. Any comments from code enforcement?
We have none.
Okay. With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We have a request for signage both above the height that is permitted by the ordinance and in excess of the area that is permitted by the ordinance. On 6 Loudon Road, we heard arguments that the positioning of the building requires that such signage be on the building in order to identify the tenants and guide people coming to the building. Andrew, let's start with you. What are your thoughts on this?
I think that I think the property is unique in the sense that it's the only office building, anywhere in that vicinity, and it is set back. So in that sense, I would be inclined to support a variance. I think this one is excessive. I think that just thinking about larger cities, like in New York City, obviously you've got these enormous buildings. You're not going to have numerous names on the building of every single tenant, or even hardly any of them. You might have a building that has one name on it.
Sounds like a New Yorker cartoon.
Yeah, like the marquee. Yeah, like the marquee tenant, or someone would have naming rights to a building or something. And I think this building, I could personally see approving a variance of larger than what the ordinance might allow, because it's set back. I don't know if it's wooded, but it definitely is not the easiest building to see from the street. But I think that this is more than double, I think, what would be permitted. And I don't think the building is entitled to have signage for multiple tenants, just as a matter of right.
Mr. Evans.
Well, I kind of agree with that in that, and I confess that I once had trouble finding that building and understanding where it was, but that was before GPS. And I think that the advancement there kind of counteracts the argument with people needing to be able to find the building. I mean, I just think that kind of goes away. So I'm kind of offended by the not minimal approach, but the maximal approach of these signs. And I would lean towards not approving this.
Mr. Monahan.
Yeah, I did the math for Andrew. It's about a 330% in excess of what's allowed, so it seems pretty excessive to me, and I'm not convinced that there's inadequate signage in the building now, whether it be GPS or otherwise. So, and other to that.
Okay. Nick.
Yeah, I'm not persuaded by the hardship argument, only because there are dozens of buildings that are multiple stories that could really argue the same issue, particularly on Main Street. I think 6 Loudon Road is certainly adequate signage for just about anybody, I think. Yeah. So I tend to not support the application.
I agree with my colleagues and all their remarks about the signage. Would anyone care to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion. If people are okay taking up all three at the same time,
Everyone comfortable with that? Okay.
I'll move that we deny items 1, 2, and 3.
I'll second it.
It's been moved and seconded, the reasons being that hardship has not been demonstrated in this case, and that it's certainly not the minimum.
Yeah, and it's an excessive request above what is allowed. So.
Okay. Is there a second?
I did. I
Oh,
seconded
we
it.
already got a second. I'm just one motion behind the game here, sorry. Very good. Any discussion on the motion?
I guess I just should say that we didn't really discuss, it wasn't really, discussed in detail, variances 2 and 3. I might consider them under, if they were attached to a different plan, but I think for this plan, they don't really make sense.
Very good.
In terms of above, where the grade would be.
And this plan is what we got before us.
Yeah.
Very good. With that, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variances are denied. That brings us to case 6221, Matthew Lear, 8 Grove Street, RD Downtown Residential District. The applicant wishes to construct a breezeway connecting the main house to an existing barn and requests a variance to the table of dimensional regulations to allow the construction of a breezeway between the principal structure, the house, and an existing barn within the 20-foot rear yard setback. Mr. Lear, are you with us? Ah, there you are. I'm fine. How are you? Do you swear to tell the truth and nothing but?
I do.
So I will assume that you are indeed Matthew Lear
Yes, sir.
and ask you to go ahead and tell us what you'd like us to know.
Yeah, so 2 things just to make a change on it. I did have a surveyor come out. We are, part of the variance is that it's so close to the property line, so we also wanted to ask if we could move it a foot forward because it is so close, if that helps this. I don't know if that's another variance to it, but just simply moving it forward 12 inches gets it not so close. He didn't in time get the certified plot plan for it.
So what would be the new distance in terms of the setback?
Everything, so the back of the barn, which exists, the property line from the surveyor, he believes it's close to 6 or 8 inches off the back of it. We were gonna stay in plane with it to not go any closer to our neighbor at 32 Thorndike. But if we moved it in a foot, we are not breaking any plane that the current property goes back towards 32 Thorndike.
So you'd be a foot less in violation than the barn is.
Correct. And therefore not breaking any plane that's already existing on the property to be any closer to our abutting neighbor.
Ernie, do you see any problem with this in terms of the way the case is recorded in the agenda and so forth?
No, we'd actually discussed the issue of it being very close to the property line and that he might want to get some confirmation, and that's why I think he commissioned the survey. So I think because it's going to be less non-conforming, that it's okay.
Very good. Okay, then let's assume that it's moved, I assume the whole business would just move forward a
Yeah,
foot?
same 11 foot, but just move it
Okay,
towards the front of Grove Street 12 inches and, the thing would just shift 12 inches forward.
very good. We'll assume that's what we're looking at. And why don't you just hit on the high points of why you feel the variance is justified?
So, I don't know if you can see it in here, but the smaller roof line's a kitchen. Below that is a little 4x4 bulkhead, let's call it. I can show you the bumps on my head from hitting that going in and out. It would be nice, one, to get to the barn in the winter just by walking through the breezeway. And 2, it would allow us to create a better access point to the basement of that house. And it is a 1860, 1890 house, so the stairs even getting to the basement are a little rough. So it kind of helps us on 2 points. 1, access to the barn, and 2, access to the basement of that property.
Okay, and you're, how old is your house?
1860 or 1890, we
1860.
can't quite
Okay.
get it perfect there, so.
Somewhere between way before the zoning ordinance and a long time before the zoning.
One of the original houses on the road, I would guess, so.
And what's our address here?
Thorndike?
8 Grove.
8 Grove, so that's over in the Old South End?
Yep.
Okay.
And there's others like it, it's not, all the neighbors, even abutting, are very close property lines, so I don't feel like it's asking for something different within the same block, if you will.
Other questions from the board? Anyone? Ted?
I'm just confused about what the actual setback would be for your proposed construction. You're
So,
saying it's going to be a foot different than what? I'm not clear on.
can I show you? So there's a little drawing there. It's the second to last page on the back. It's the little rendering I had someone do. It would just, if you're looking at the back of the barn, we were gonna stay flush with the barn.
Right.
I'm saying shift it in a foot,
Right.
so we're not as close. Like I said, I don't have a certified plot plan yet, but he said it's roughly between 6 or 8 inches off the back of the barn. So I thought by bringing it closer to Grove Street, we're just getting 18, 20 inches away. It's not so close to the actual boundary line.
How far would it be from the boundary line, though?
Oh, if it is 6 or 8 inches, would be 18 to 20.
From the property line?
Correct.
What would it be if it was flush with the barn? Like, what's the current?
He's saying about 6 to 8 inches.
So the current barn is about 6 to 8 inches from the,
Correct. There's very little,
Just barely.
yeah.
got it.
And what's on the lot immediately behind you?
Lawn, it's our neighbor at 32. Their grass, then driveway, and we'll actually be sharing surveyors because they're going to be looking forward to a variance and permit to tear down their garage and build something in the future.
The height of the breezeway, I'm assuming, is lower.
Less than both of the abutting or connecting structures.
So your neighbor's on Thorndike?
Yeah, so.
Yeah, you can go up there and show us if you want.
Sure.
Yeah, that'd be good.
So these are our neighbors. This is their old barn.
Okay.
This is our kitchen. There would theoretically be a door coming down, maybe 6 stairs to the breezeway,
Right.
and that would connect us into the barn. Right now, you can see even on this, it shows it pretty close.
Right.
So we're saying if we just pull it in a foot, it just gets it off being so, I mean, when we excavate if this was past the foundation, the footing would actually be potentially under the lot line, so pulling in a foot keeps everything in plane away from the property line.
Right.
Right, because we don't actually have the authority to let you put your structure on their property.
Correct.
Okay, no, I'm just kidding.
Yeah, among our vast powers does not include giving you the use of somebody else's land.
We've tried for that, but.
Okay.
And you're not getting the electronic sign.
Okay. Any other questions from the board? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone who would like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in opposition to it? Any comments from code enforcement?
There is a letter here from an abutter.
Oh, did I miss that?
No, I just got it.
Okay.
So it's up on the board right now, and I will actually pass it out to you.
Good, because my eyesight does not include reading. It might have when I was younger, but thank you.
Thank you, Randy.
This is a letter from Joseph Johnson to Ernie Creveling, the Code Enforcement Administrator. The letter concerning the Zoning Board of Appeal, Matthew Lear's property. After speaking to Matt about the letter, which was received only concerning the barn breezeway to the house, Matt had earlier spoken to my wife about an office and bathroom. It was also going to be addressed and part of the variance request. There is a concern that these additional items were not on our letters. The request where the connection from the house does not concern me. The issue is the future in-law apartment that has been mentioned in the past. I do not and will not agree to an apartment in the barn. It is right on my property line. Once the bathroom goes in, the apartment would be next. Let it be known that Matt and his family are a wonderful, happy family, a nice addition to the neighborhood. And as I say, it's Joseph F. Johnson. He does not say
4 Grove Street.
4 Grove Street. Okay. Very good. Mr. Lear, would you like to offer any factual clarification in response to what you've heard?
Yeah, so
Come on up so we can get you on the mic.
I would like to build the breezeway. I realize that it would be, I'm a builder, so I realize I would have to come back for a permit, a variance of any sort to do anything accessory dwelling. Right now, we just want to simply connect the house and the barn and have easier access to the basement. So-
Very good.
He seems to be referencing a prior letter or something. He says there's a concern these additional items were not on our letters.
Oh, I
know what he's getting
when
at?
I talked to, Ernie? Yes. He said it would be helpful if I brought, like, if both neighbors abutting had no issue, so I knocked on Joe's door and said, would you be willing to do that? We get along just fine, and again, with Jason and Julie, they also said that they would be willing to write a letter if need be, so I'm actually surprised, but if he's worried about rental, that would be a whole nother, we'd be meeting for something else. It'd be accessory dwelling at that point, not a breezeway. So
Okay.
that's not what I'm asking for today.
Understood.
Okay.
Thank you. With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed. Is there any comment from code enforcement?
Well, I just wanted to clarify, in the letter, he mentioned that the bathroom wasn't mentioned, and the only reason that the bathroom was not mentioned is because that would have been allowed, they could have applied for a permit for that anyway. We just kept it to the issue of the breezeway being closer to the property line.
Understood. Okay.
You mean if he puts a bathroom in the barn, that doesn't require a variance?
Very good. With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed. We have a request to construct a connector between the barn and an existing house. Both the barn and the house are in violation of the rear yard setback. And we've heard testimony that if there's going to be a connector, it's going to be in violation of the rear yard setback. And that the appellant maintains that this is a reasonable use to connect his house and his barn for winter use and give him better access to his basement. Let's start at the other end of the table. Mr. Wallner.
Yeah, I think it's certainly less intrusive than the current structures in terms of setbacks. So I'm inclined to support it.
Very good. Mr. Monahan.
I agree.
Great.
Yeah, I agree, and I think I don't know how many breezeway cases we've had, but very frequently we've approved garages or porches that are in line with the current structure and seem, reasonable use of the property. So I think this certainly, meets that same standard.
And in fact, it's less in violation than things are already on the property. I agree with my colleagues as well. Would anyone care to make a motion?
I'll move approval.
Is there a second?
I'll second, but we should probably make sure there's a notation about the change in the, moving it back a foot. I mean, it'd be represented in the minutes, and it would be part of the motion if that's.
Approved as modified by the
Yeah.
by the
All right.
appellant.
So the motion's amended. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variance is granted. You're welcome. That brings us to the next case this evening, which is case 6521, Kevin and Carol Cotterly of 3 Lawrence Street Extension, RM Medium Density Residential District. The applicant wishes to install an above-ground swimming pool and requests a variance from Article 28.532 accessory buildings and facilities within 5 feet of the rear property line, where a setback of 25 feet is required. That is, the swimming pool would be set within 5 feet of the rear property line. You swear to tell the truth and nothing but?
Yes.
Would you identify yourselves for the record, please?
I'm Kevin Cotterly.
Carol Cotterly.
What would you like us to know?
Would like to install a pool approximately 5 feet from the back boundary line, where a 25-foot buffer is required. The property behind us, I believe, is owned by Sandy's Pet Store. They have, I believe, an easement going through there for city water pipes. I believe the fire department or the city of Concord owns some land as well that abuts our property. So I don't believe it'll have any impact on the neighborhood.
The owner of Sandy's Pet actually this summer helped us take some of his trees down, and we split the cost. So he knows that we want to put a pool there, and some of his trees were half dead, and we had some concerns about that. So he was in agreement to take the trees down, and we split the cost. So I don't think he has any issues.
That's the pet store?
You can't. It's way. You can't see the pet store. This is Lawrence Street Extension. I don't know how many. It's like a half a mile from.
Yeah, it's quite a
From our
distance
house
from.
Where is Lawrence?
Lawrence Street Extension is off of Lawrence Street, which is off of Airport Road. And then
okay.
Sandy's Pet is on, what is
Old
that?
Turnpike Road.
So it's way over.
So
It's
there's-
more trees. You can't even see Sandy's from anywhere from our backyard.
Are there any residential neighbors back there?
Nothing. And we have a fence, stockade fence.
So wait, on this map, can you
Yeah.
put the mouse where they are? There, okay.
So there's Sandy's.
Yes.
You see it? Yeah.
Yeah.
Way down there.
I have a question for code enforcement. I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Oh, no, no, I'm fine.
This would be an accessory structure, correct?
Correct.
But it is not allowed to be 5 feet from the property line because of its size?
Because more than 250 square feet of the pool is within the rear yard setback. So that was an odd part that I read in the ordinance, and that was the basis for the variance. I think I received a call from you, and you questioned what was being appealed, what was being said by code enforcement, and it was that fact that the full swimming pool rests within the rear yard setback, and only 250 square feet is allowed to.
And if it were just 250, it could go 5 feet from the,
Yes.
right, okay.
So a smaller pool, they wouldn't need a variance?
Correct, and if it was pulled, if it was able to be pulled out of the 25-foot setback so that only 250 square feet was left to it, then that would be okay as well.
Tell us about why you can't put it elsewhere.
What was that?
Why you can't, tell us about why you can't put it within the allowed area.
It would be right up against the house. We've, over the summer, because we actually started the process back in May. The yard gets the full sun where we want to put the pool. And we felt that it was away from the house. We can't go to the side of the house because of the septic and the leach field. So that was basically the only level area that would be the most beneficial for sun.
Also, we would lose a lot of yardage. Can I just show you?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
So this is our deck. If the pool was to be sort of more away from the fence, the pool also has stairs. So we would be coming down our deck here, and then the stairs would be here. So it would be very awkward right in front of our deck. So if it was here, we would have a little more frontage. We have 3 dogs that run around in the yard, so, so, yeah.
What is the square foot area of the pool?
I don't know, it's,
This is a 20 by 32.
Yeah,
20 by
it's-
32, okay,
640.
so
There's an
640.
example of the pool. There's a picture of the actual pool
Right.
someplace in there.
Yeah.
So I'll find
That
it.
other lot, so the one to the south there, or at least at the bottom of the screen, is the pet store. What's that other lot up there? Do you know who's?
On which side?
The
That,
other,
Upper right hand.
that's over by, Russell Ave, I believe. There's a house somewhere, but it's not, so that's an example, that's a Gibraltar pool. So those stairs would be kind of awkward up against our stairs. It just wouldn't make, it would be very, you would have to dodge. We had it all mapped out and it just wasn't gonna work. But if it was just a little bit further back near the fence, it would be favorable. And we have a lot of other yardage, but there's septic there, so it's not, it wouldn't work out that way. It's a rectangular space.
Other questions from the board? Andrew, anything? Okay.
No, that's it.
Anything else you'd like us to know?
No,
I think we touched base on everything that, the
Very good.
information that you would need.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Is there anyone here who would like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in opposition to it? Any comments from code enforcement?
Sure, as long as everybody's clear on why it's being appealed.
Yeah, I think we got that. Everyone clear on that?
So.
All right, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed. We have a request for a setback variance, rear yard setback variance to install an above-ground pool. We heard testimony that the configuration of the lot is such that this is the optimum place for the pool, and there are several other locations where it either could not be put or should not be put. And we also heard testimony from code enforcement that it is the size of the pool rather than the existence of the pool that creates the violation. Andrew, what are your thoughts on this?
I have one other quick question for, if anyone knows, they have to do a fence for the pool, right? I mean, there has to be a fence, right, around the pool?
Barrier, yes.
Yeah. I think that it's unique, their lot's unique in that their neighbors, their relevant neighbors are so far, the structures are so far away, and it doesn't seem like there's any possibility of any structures or certainly any residents anywhere near the pool. It doesn't seem like it's, the purpose of it is not to crowd someone else's space or have activity or near someone else, and I think that that's not a risk here at all, and I think they explained pretty clearly why this is the most logical spot, so it's a reasonable use of their property, so I'd be inclined to approve it.
Very good. Mr. Evans?
I think that there's a unique aspect to the property sufficient to justify granting the variance.
Yes, I agree with what's been said so far.
So do I.
As do I. Would anyone care to make a motion?
I move to approve.
Is there a motion and a second? Is there any discussion on the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variance is granted.
Good luck.
You're welcome.
Yeah, right.
That brings us to case 6321, Barlow Signs for Market Basket, 1517 Merchants Way, GWP Gateway Performance District. The applicant seeks approval to install 2 tenant building signs which exceed the maximum size required by Article 2869A, Table of Maximum Side Dimensions for non-residential districts, which will require the following variances from said article. To install an internally illuminated wall sign for Market Basket, which is 482.42 square feet in size, where a sign not to exceed 200 square feet is required, and to install an internally illuminated wall sign for a future tenant, which is 256.75 square feet in size, where a sign not to exceed 124 square feet is required. Do you swear? Tell the truth and nothing but.
Yes.
Would you identify yourself for the record, please?
Yes, my name is Brandon Courier. I'm here from Barlow Signs, representing Market Basket located at 15 through 17 Merchants Way. I'm also accompanied by Carmine Tomas here in the audience with us, representing Market Basket.
Okay.
So since the original submittal, a tenant for the location on the right side has been selected. So I have updated drawings showing their signage, so it just doesn't say retail. It actually says home goods. I have a flash drive if you want me to present that up there, and then I have paper.
Yes, if you can pop that up for us, that would be helpful.
Do you want to slide these across as well?
That way all those shut-ins at home can see it.
Perfect.
Yeah, you'll probably have to do it over here.
Oh, okay. I have a flash drive. I can show you where to
Are all of these the same?
go. Yes, they're all the same.
So the,
This looks like what was.
what you handed, oh no, home goods, that was. Home goods is the new information?
Yes. Yep. So just the drawing that was submitted with the original package just stated retail space, so we wanted to be more accurate with what we were presenting.
Okay.
So as you mentioned, we are here tonight seeking approval for the 2 separate wall signs that exceed maximum square footage per code, which is items B and C. I provided you the most recent drawing. As I mentioned, the current sign for Market Basket over the main entrance is 482.42, where 200 is allowed. The Home Goods is 238, where 124 is allowed. So as you guys all know, this is a very unique location and development. These stores are specifically deeply set back from the intersection of Hoyt and Whitney Road, roughly 1,000 feet. Market Basket and Home Goods are the anchors for the development. Without sufficient signage, it'll hinder the success of guiding the wayfinding public to the entrances. The signs that we're proposing are not out of character with the construction or design of the building. Both signs are scaled to fit within the fascia of the buildings as well, so they're not out of scale size. So in conclusion, we're seeking approval for the additional square footage for these 2 wall signs that fit within the character in this business-heavy district to aid the wayfinding public back to this location.
If you were to put a sign, let's start with Market Basket, that did meet the requirements for square footage, can you show me on the sign up on the graphic up there approximately how much space that would take up?
Okay, so this one here, I don't have a visual representation for you, but it would be more than half of that sign. So I would say for a representation portion, it would probably in about over these 2 windows here, half and half. I mean, the height of the letters would be much smaller as well. So it'll be a very
So
huge reduction.
What you're asking for is a sign a little more than twice the size that the ordinance allows for.
That is correct. And Market Basket, when they design their buildings, they take local code into consideration. They don't want to have any issues, but they also design their storefronts, especially like I mentioned with this one, so deeply set back that they want to be able to attract customers back to this location. I believe there's at least 2 buildings, possibly 3 buildings in the way before you get back to that area. So we want to be able to capture the public as they enter in out of that new roundabout.
And the home goods sign is also roughly twice?
Yes, yep, just about. And again, that's just to fit within the character of that front fascia to attract customers to be going back into that area. The original proposal had a square footage that was a little bit larger than what the home goods sign is for scaling purposes. I believe it's about 18 square foot less than what was on the original submittal, just due to their brand standards and their scaling.
Now, I think is there a Psych Plan in here somewhere?
Yes,
Seems to me I
it
saw
should be in the
something.
other document that we can pull up.
So the signs that you're proposing would be visible from Hoyt Road as well as from Whitney Road?
Yes, but very far back in the distance, as I mentioned, roughly 1,000 feet. I didn't measure it per se, but from a satellite view, it was roughly 1,000 feet.
Okay. And most of your clientele, would they be coming from the highway?
It's hard to tell, but I would say that there's probably a good chance that most of it would be coming from the highway. You also have the opposite direction, which brings you into the, I believe, Kentucket area and backside of Merrimack Valley.
You mean Pennacook?
Pennacook, sorry, thank you.
If you're into Kentucky, you've taken a long way.
Wrong turn, sorry, I apologize for that.
You need a bigger sign.
What's the building? There's a building that's shown more or less dead center on the site. I think it's identified here, but my old eyes can't read this fine print. Proposed restaurant.
Is that between the gas station and the market basket on that far side closest to?
Oh,
White Road?
I see. So there's a gas station closest to Whitney Road,
Yes, that is currently there.
and then another building of some kind close to Whitney Road.
Yes.
Actually, two or three of them.
Yeah, I can't read the fine print either.
Proposed urgent care, proposed bank.
So you've got several tenants on the property that would be
Yes.
between Market Basket and the road.
That is correct. This is a, I believe, 43 acre property with multiple tenants and buildings.
Okay. Do you know what roughly the distance is from, if I'm coming off the traffic circle that's on Whitney Road, not the one on Hoyt Road,
Okay.
onto your property?
Yes.
How far am I when I first make that turn from the supermarket?
That's where I took my my rough measurement of 1,000 feet. That would be from that rotary that's currently, or I'm sorry, that roundabout that's currently there, back to the storefront.
Okay.
So it is a long distance. Typically, what we do when we're talking about copy height, we do a 10-foot is an equivalent to 1 inch. So that would essentially be a letter set that was a little bit over 8 feet tall. So we did have, it is smaller, it's a 7-foot letter set. So we are a little bit under what the typical standard is for signage and the viewing of signage, especially in a moving vehicle. So we took that into consideration. We got as close as we could, but we also respected the code.
And the building that Market Basket would be in is 30 feet high at the highest?
I believe so. That's
Other than the towers that are on,
drawing to
the
confirm.
gables that are on either side?
I believe that is correct, yes.
Other questions from the board?
Market Basket sign, how does that compare with the two Market Basket signs in terms of size of the ones in Concord on Fort Eddy and downtown?
I believe Fort Eddy is a 6-foot letter set, so it'll be 1 foot smaller. I'm familiar with the Warner set. That is a 7-foot set. I'm unsure of the other location in Concord.
So you speak about visibility from being 1,000 feet, yet I peeked ahead at your next request, and you've really got a directional sign that you're proposing at the roundabout, which would sort of alleviate the question about visibility, wouldn't it?
Potentially, but not necessarily, because you have, as we've talked about before, we have a pylon sign where tenants like to be seen on that, to be attracted to from that one area. But also, the main identifier on their buildings, that's another huge point, because that identifies and attracts the wayfinding public to that main entrance. So with it being so deeply set back, that's why we feel so strongly about having this letter set this size.
Other questions from the board? Jim?
Yeah, go ahead, Ted.
So I have a question. If you're traveling along Hoyt Road towards the highway, you're running parallel with the distance you're talking about.
Correct.
So when you're in this vicinity here, you're actually pretty close to that building, right? I mean,
Yes, but the road, as you come up to the highway, the elevation does go up, and the amount of trees also go up as well. So you can't see through as clear.
These are not on the property?
I don't know, I can't speak to that.
Andrew?
I mean, this is probably, I mean, this may be obvious, but I haven't followed this development, too much other than what's been in the paper, so I don't know too much about it really. Why is it so far set back? I mean, is that, I know that's like the big reason for your variance, but is that you obviously had control over where to put it. I assume there's a good reason, but what is that reason?
I'll have to pass the torch
Okay.
to Lori.
Ms. Rossio, do you swear to tell the truth?
I do.
Would you identify yourself for the record, please?
Laurie Rossio, I'm with Interchange Development LLC, the developer for Merchants Way. To answer your question about why it's so far back, the Market Basket property, the building itself is between Market Basket and Home Goods. It's over 100,000 square feet. It has a very large parking field, and that's pretty much the only place in the site you could have fit all of that parking and building area. And then the intent is also you provide additional co-tenants along the way. It makes for a synergistic approach to a development. I also wanted to address, there was one other question about, oh shoot, what was the other question about? If I remember it, I'll try to answer it, sorry.
Okay. Other questions? Andrew, all set?
So this hasn't, unless I missed a meeting, I don't think this development has needed any other variances, right? Obviously,
Correct.
you need all kinds of approval from the city, so the size of it and the setbacks and all that, you're in compliance.
Correct.
Okay. Other questions? Nope. Anything else you'd like us to know?
No.
All right.
Let's use a magnifying glass.
Pardon?
I said I had to use a magnifying glass. I wasn't on my cell phone, by the way.
Okay. Why don't you just stay there, because it doesn't look like there's going to be a huge amount of public testimony here. Is there anyone who wishes to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone who wishes to be heard in opposition to it? Any comments from code enforcement?
No, sir.
With that, we'll declare the public testimony portion of the hearing closed. We have a request for oversized signs, roughly 100% oversized in one case and about 120% oversized in the other, for Market Basket and Home Goods. We heard testimony that the positioning of the buildings on the site, along with the other buildings that are on the site, require for wayfinding that the signs be larger than what would normally be permitted in order for people to find their way around. Very good. Andrew, how do you see this one?
Hey, I feel, this is more of a procedural comment, that, when we're talking about like the character of a neighborhood, I mean, they're basically creating an entire neighborhood from scratch. So it's a little hard for me to comment on like what's the character of the neighborhood. I think that I'm taking it as granted this has gone through years of discussion and deliberation and
Yeah,
yeah,
many years, yes.
right? I mean, many, decades maybe, and obviously there's been, pros and cons, and it's been debated in the community, but this has been approved on some level, and it's a Market Basket, and it doesn't seem like their sign is different than, what the normal Market Basket sign would be, and it is a huge structure relative to that area, and it is set back, so it's hard for me, for me to stand in the way that I can think of. It doesn't seem like a classic variance situation. I kind of wish that procedurally this was dealt with more at the planning board or the city, on some level, and didn't have to come to us for this one variance for such a huge project. But I guess that's what it has to be.
They are required to put together a whole signage program for approval by the planning board. And in fact, I just had a conversation this morning with code enforcement about this. The way things are set up now, you have to go, if you need a variance, you have to go to us first.
So after, if we approve it, they still have to get planning permission.
They do, although at least the size of the signs will already be established
Yeah.
by our approval. But that is the way things are set up at this point. Now, I suppose we do have the authority to request a consult from the planning board. Is that not true, Bernie?
From what I understand from Attorney Kennedy, yes.
Okay. We do have the authority to defer this decision and ask for a consult from the planning board after they have reviewed the overall sign package with the appellant. Obviously, there is a sign package on offer because we're looking at a significant part of it here, but there's several other buildings on the property.
It strikes me that, and I'm open to other people's, view on this, that it would be, if we only allowed them what's allowed by the code, like the strict interpretation of the code, it's gonna completely change the market basket development. But maybe I'm wrong, but, yeah,
Right.
those are my thoughts.
Got it. Ted?
Well, I'm kind of inclined to say that, the property is unique. I mean, normally you have a market that sort of faces the street, and the parking lot is between the street and the building, and, the signage, is much more readily visible. So I can see that there's some uniqueness to the property and the configuration. I'm happy to hear that it's not too much bigger than Warner's sign. I don't know what kind of regulations they have up there, but, so I guess I would be inclined to allow it.
Yeah, I'm trying to get my arms around some procedural questions, I think. I mean, they knew what this ordinance was when they came in and dug a big hole up on, to put the property, and they knew what they were getting into. And so my concern is that we see that there's a lot of stuff that's going to get developed on this property. And so the CVS is going to come in and say, I need a sign as big as Market Basket. And the convenient MD is going to say, I need one just a little bigger than CVS. And so my question, if we consulted with the planning board on the sign package, would it just be for, Demoulas and Home Goods, or will it be for all of the future signage on this piece of property?
Ernie, can you enlighten us on that?
Well, according to the ordinance, everybody is supposed to come up with a master signage plan. And it talks about in there for anything subject to major site plan review, that, that's done through the planning board. So, I mean, you're kind of in a catch-22 here, where you've got, a development that's coming along in pieces and fits and starts, and they're trying to get it done. But you also sort of take the thunder away from the planning board in reviewing, the signs that are involved with the development. So it kind of takes it out of their hands. So I mean, it's a tough. I think the process needs to be improved, as you said, but that's just opinion. I mean, it's a tough call to make here, because they are developing it as they go along. But to your point, the battle of the signs too. How do you go about that?
Nick?
But I should also say, I'm not indifferent to the fact that this is very deep into the property, which makes it unique perhaps but I still have this whole larger concern around the sign package. The signage is generally prescribed by the ordinance, so there's not necessarily a need for a sign package unless you're doing something other than what's allowed in the ordinance. So.
Well, with any chain request that we've had in the past, we've been pretty receptive to oversized signs. I'm thinking of Lowe's, didn't we do Burlington Coat Factory?
We did Hannaford on Fort Eddy.
Fort Hannaford's and so forth, and
It's usually been a question of scale.
And I think this is pretty close to what we're seeing on Fort Eddy in terms of size. They said it was slightly larger, so I'm inclined to support the request.
I do have a follow-up question based on what Jim said, if anyone knows. If these additional structures or chains are going to be put on there, like CVS or bank or whatnot, is it going to be the same lot, and is what we approve the maximum for the entire lot, or will they be entitled to a certain signage if there's a new structure that goes on there? Does anyone know that? Like say.
I lost the thread of your question.
Okay, say the idea is there's gonna be different retailers coming on here, right? Some known, some to be determined. They're all obviously gonna need their own sign. Are we maxing out? Are they maxing out what the entire lot is allowed, and then any additional store is gonna need to come back for a variance to go over?
Well, they'll be in separate buildings.
So every building gets its own? It's not for the lot, it's each building?
Is that correct, Ernie?
Can you give me a second? I'll look it up.
Okay.
From what we've seen in the past here, it's usually the frontage of the building determines how much sign you're allowed by right, how much signage you're allowed.
Yes, linear feet.
But some of these buildings might, do they all have frontage if they're set back and then they're, you know?
I think what we're wrestling with here is actually what was captured in what Andrew said in his first remarks, that we're creating a whole new little village here in the form of a shopping center with multiple tenants, similar to the kinds of things that you see more often in Massachusetts than you do in New Hampshire. You do see them in southern New Hampshire. And the sign ordinance, as it's written, imagines buildings on Main Street or buildings elsewhere in town that are on a lot, maybe two lots, and the idea is not to have the signage begin to be chaotic up and down the street, wherever the street happens to be. And the concern for chaos is obviously there. That said, I do have, and I understand completely about having gone to shopping centers like this. When you enter it, yeah, you know you're going to Market Basket, but particularly if you're not familiar with the territory, you really do need to be able to see a sign to get to the store if it's your first time there, because there's a lot of stuff going on, and you're not quite sure. And it's a great time to run into the back of somebody else because you're looking around for the store you want. You don't know where it is. So I can certainly see an argument, both from the point of view of design and safety, for larger signs, given the scale of the whole overall arrangement of things. I do have a concern that something like this ought to the extent that it's possible, have a coherent sign plan. And I'm seeing Ms. Rosio's hand over here, and I don't think she's just waving hi. So can you fill us in on the idea of a comprehensive sign program?
Yes, I actually asked Mr. Bahia about that before we submitted this request, because in our reading of the ordinance, there was a requirement for a master sign plan. So I asked him to provide an example of a master sign plan, and he said, there's never been anything like this. So he didn't know.
Like this development.
Right.
Right.
It's a land condominium, it's multiple buildings, it's a very, very large parcel. It's multiple zones even. We have gateway and industrial zone. So he didn't know what to do, and he just said, well, let's just start, and we'll figure it out as we go along. The planning board has reviewed our condominium documents, which have an entire section relative to signage on the buildings and within the site, which actually is identical in wording to the city's ordinance regarding signage for things like waving signs and blow-up signs and all that kind of stuff. So some of that discussion has already happened. We've already had that review by the planning staff, but we weren't yet, he wasn't really sure how to guide us through the sign plan, and we were going to work on that.
How many of the buildings on the site plan are actually under construction or slated to go into construction soon?
There's 2 buildings under construction with 3 tenants, this being one of them with 2 tenants, and then the state liquor store is the other building under construction.
All right, so in the site plans, where did I put my?
So while Chris is looking for that, I don't know if you're aware or how much, but we all got a letter from Carlos tonight saying,
Yes.
basically, be careful with what you do on signs.
We were actually going to talk about, we were actually going to ask if you could read that letter into the record for the next application. We didn't
Yeah,
know that
well,
it
we
was
can-
actually
Yeah.
applied to
Yes,
this
and we
one,
can
but
give
if
you a
it
copy,
does,
too.
then maybe we should.
does apply specifically to the next application.
Right, so that's why we thought we would
And
ask them.
it did also make mention of an earlier case, but not yours. Although I think all of these were on his mind when he wrote the memo, and I think he's probably attempting to make us alert to the complexity of the issue here. So looking at your site plan, the big building, which is more or less all on the eastern end of things, is under construction. And that's the one that we're looking at for signage right now.
Correct.
And the liquor store is,
To the south of that, is it?
It's just to the west. It's a small building, just to the west of the parking lot for the Market Basket. Oh, sorry,
Would you
you
go
only
up
have a
there?
condominium plan here. It would be here.
okay. And so far, that's it?
That's it right now. Next year, in the spring, you'll see a Wendy's before you, so we don't have their sign package yet.
Okay.
And they'll be in the corner, southeast quadrant of the roundabout at at Whitney Road and Merchants Way.
Okay.
And that's the only other tenant that has a site plan approval. So all the buildings still need to go through site plan approval and ADR for all their sign packages.
Right. Okay.
Does the liquor commission own the building, or are you leasing?
We are leasing it to the state.
So what's their, is their sign?
They'd have to
They're-
comply with the, she would have to comply with the city ordinance.
They actually don't.
They're thinking they're exempt.
Because they're the
She is.
state.
Oh, okay.
They're the only tenant in the building, so, and we just went to ADR yesterday? Yeah, yesterday for those signs.
They have an electronic sign.
But they're not having an electronic sign.
But they don't need a variance. They can do
Cocktail
what they want.
pouring.
Yeah,
It's coming.
They try to go through the process, we'll put it that way.
Okay.
They go through the motions.
Yes. Oh, I did want to answer another
They do,
question.
yes.
I did remember the question that came up. I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but you asked the question about the trees and being able to see it from White Road. One thing to keep in mind, it's a 300-foot wide right-of-way, and Route 4 is centered in the right-of-way. So there's a good distance off of White Road. And in addition, the city is going to be moving the on-ramp to
Because we don't
I-93
have that one.
further away
Yeah,
from
this
this
is just
building.
condominium.
So where you might have seen it now, you probably
Not gonna
won't
happen
see
soon.
it once the ramp is moved.
Thank you.
Okay.
Is that it right there? No. I'm just trying to figure out the map, only because we have this map, and we're seeing a different kind of map on the
Right.
action.
I'm not seeing any map at the moment.
Yeah, at the moment, I didn't have
The one
those
with the buildings on it.
parking lot lines on it and all
Let's
that.
see, here we
Yeah,
go.
Oh, we saw the condo plan.
There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what we're looking at on the,
Okay, so the
Yes.
building that's circled, that's gonna be Market Basket, is that
Correct.
correct? And what's the building to the south of that?
That's the home goods.
Okay,
The
now I get
long
it.
skinny one is in the industrial.
And where's the liquor store?
It's to
Right
the-
underneath the end.
Okay, good, thank you.
all right. Okay. Very good. Where were we? We were
Well, I have a
asking
question,
questions.
because the more we're talking about this being a unique development for Concord, I mean, I kind of am picturing things like Bedford as an example, where the old
Macy's.
Macy's
Where
was
Macy's
and all
used
that
to be.
kind of, all those developments seem like pads, you know, a very similar kind of thing. But Concord, it's unique, and you know, what is the wisdom of us making these piecemeal decisions when there's a planning board that should, you know, should have some role in maybe there should be separate limits for this kind of a project that differ, because it's not on a lot on Main Street like we talked about. It's often this separate development of its own, and it seems to me it's, I mean, I don't want to get into turf wars, but it just seems like we're going to get into just the kind of thing we don't want to do, and that is approve a sign like this and have a series of tenants coming in, you know, in the next 45 years asking for the same damn thing.
Because we'll get the Wendy's
Well,
out, they
let's-
want their sign.
Let's
and-
get into that with discussion. So I think we've gone through questions?
Yeah.
Okay. So, code enforcement, any more comments?
You didn't happen to find that answer, did you, on
Right.
what future tenants might be entitled
It's
to?
based on road frontage. All right, and in the case where there's not direct road frontage, it's based upon the frontage to the parking lot. the principal tenants. So, in this case, they've got it developed into a condominium plan so that they could essentially use the frontage on the parking lots to determine the maximum signage for each lot. So it would be based on each lot. If you look in the zoning ordinance, there is a chart there that tells you, how much square footage you can have based on the road frontage or based on the parking lot frontage.
So is every building gonna be on a unique lot because it's condos?
No,
Or some of the lots will have more than one building?
correct. And none of the roads, internal roads, are public streets. So the frontage hasn't changed.
So
It's
how-
still whatever the distance is on White and Whitney roads.
So the sign allowance is per building, even if there's more than one building on a lot? Is that your understanding?
But there's a total maximum that would be applicable to the site,
Yeah.
so.
So we've got a situation where the ordinance and the project are in two different orbits, which I'm afraid is what we have to contend with here. I did raise the question of consulting with the planning board. However, if we're talking about, I don't know how many buildings altogether in this project, but it's a good deal more than 3. At this point, I'm not sure that, especially given what we've heard about the city's process, I'm not sure that a comprehensive sign program is going to be in the offing anytime soon. So, from my own point of view, I'm inclined to go on the record, having said all the things we've said about this, but at the same time address the buildings that we have before us, which we know are going to be built. Because we don't really have any of the rest of that information, and it doesn't sound like it even exists at this point. And it isn't reasonable to ask the appellant to wait around for however long to put up a sign on buildings that have been permitted and are being constructed. So from my point of view, I think we probably ought to act on this just as we would on any other. And I see the whole development as being a unique situation, therefore satisfying that question of the physical circumstances being unique. And from my point of view, I'd then be looking at whether or not this specific request is consistent with the other requirements for variance. How do other people look at it?
Yeah, I'm not quite there, Chris, because I just, in the event I'm here, when other things come back, I just don't want to feel that, as I said before, we're going to set some standard with this signage that the other applicants will say, well, me too. So, I mean, maybe we cannot get there, but it would be welcome if we had some sort of a global proposal about what the signage was going to look like in this new community.
We do run that risk.
Because if Wendy's comes in, they'll say, well, we need a bigger sign now because.
All our franchises have that, yeah.
Yeah, and then the next person, then you get, which we've run into that problem, in all different areas of the city, the domino effect.
Yeah, and theoretically and really in practice, we're not supposed to act on precedent. In other words, we're supposed to look at each individual situation as an individual situation. It's not stare decisis here.
But should we act on what precedent it might set?
I guess what
Carlos says we do.
I guess,
Sorry.
yeah, he says we do, but he's wrong in terms of zoning in that case. But he's also living in the real world where once one guy does it, everyone wants to do it, and those pressures will exist. I don't think it's a good solution for us to simply refuse to act on this, is I guess what I was trying to say earlier.
Since you brought it up, I don't recall being ever involved in something like that. What would a consultation with the planning board look like?
We've never done it.
Like,
So-
we meet with them, or we write them and they write back? We show up at their meeting, like what?
I guess the first thing I would probably do, rather than have a joint meeting where we get nowhere, pretty much, is have them come back to us and say, all right, you know this project is coming, you've already been involved in it up to your ears. What's your take on the overall question of signage here? And what is the stage of your discussions with the appellant, with the developer? How, from the point of view of the overall plan, would you like to see this sugar out, given the fact that we need to act within a certain reasonable period of time when an appeal is put forward to us, rather than put it off indefinitely, as long as they've satisfied the requirements for an application, which they have. So I guess that's the way I would think of it happening, but I don't remember ever doing it. And I guess, I don't know, I guess we'd be looking, probably go to the planning department and say, please consult the planning board and the design review committee and come back to us in a month and tell us how you feel about it. I don't know if we get an answer or not.
I guess my hope, maybe this is too aspirational, but that someone in city government in this project said there's supposed to be some sort of global sign strategy for this piece of property. And my hope would be, and I don't know if this would work or not, that the planning board would adopt something like that, and then the applicants can come in and say, we need a variance, and it's consistent with the global sign process that we came up with, so that we're not, so that we are, and someone can remind me, Ernie or Chris, at some point in the last half an hour, somebody said that there was supposed to be a global sign package for this, right?
Ernie said it. We'll pin that on him.
Okay.
And Ms. Razzio told us that in discussions with Carlos, nobody quite knew what to do.
So it might never get done if the people just keep coming in and saying.
That's entirely possible. We have the ability to ask for a consultation from the planning board and set a time, and if we don't get any useful information back, we could still move forward on this. Obviously what my anxiety here is that we not tie this project up in procedural knots when there's no procedure.
Right, and we can ask them a question, but we'll probably get an answer, but it probably isn't gonna be as helpful as we hope.
Although we won't know till we try, so.
But I'm surprised that there's no, the people there are with you, right? I'm surprised.
Yes.
I'm surprised. There must have been a ton of abutters and notice on this. I'm surprised no one from the city, no neighbors, no one else is.
Well,
We're the abutters,
Yes,
I
it
can't
is.
imagine. I mean, they
there's
couldn't
not
have
much-
any
No
interest.
abutter, right?
No.
Nobody's gonna have any interest in this.
yeah.
Well, aren't the neighbors,
There
Well,
aren't any neighbors.
there
I
are
mean,
people in panic? Yeah, you're just
The
here in the
highway,
middle
you
of
get-
the gas station.
The
also
highway,
like
you got
the
the
project.
industrial stuff.
And this is such an old question that pretty much everybody who wants to say something about it has, I suspect, at this
Yeah.
point. It's been at least 10 years, I'd say, since.
I think it's longer, because I think I was sitting on a case before I retired, before I worked for the city, which was
Long time
13
ago.
years ago.
Yeah, well, this goes back to the aftermath of the whole 2020 planning process and the idea that there was going to be a market in downtown Pennacook, and then that really wasn't happening, and so on and so forth. So I guess I'd ask the board, what's your pleasure? I have no problem asking the planning board to weigh in on this. I think it's entirely possible that we won't get useful information because they're going to be in totally new territory too. And they may not be able to help us with this. I would not be uncomfortable saying that we'll review this on its merits alone, this meaning these two signs that we're looking at here, as if this building were all by itself out there for the present, because it is, with the observation that before the rest of this comes back to us in other forms, that some kind of overall signage plan be developed, and that we get a report on that from the planning board.
So I was going to propose making two motions out of that. One to approve and one to communicate with the planning board to give us something to go by in a project like this, because it's probably not going to be the only one that ever happens here like this. And it seems to me that it's our responsibility to direct the proper decision-making to the proper parties.
Right.
And I think that the overall design concepts for the signage on that property is so unique that it needs to be developed on its own.
And will be, probably. I mean, will have
Well,
to-
or ad hoc by us. I mean, if not, right? That's what's going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, I would like to say, though, that, for future projects here, as they develop, I mean, aside from this thing way back here, they're going to be closer to the turnaround, to the turnabout here. So it's going to be less of an argument that we need such a big sign, so I'm not as concerned about that. And I think it's unfair to hold the people up from this based on lack of planning. I
yeah.
mean, better words.
Well, I mean, who knows? There may never be another project like this in our.
Maybe not, but
It's a pretty big one, and certainly there's no precedent in Concord. I don't think there's anything bigger at this point.
Maybe one off of Manchester Street pretty soon that's gonna come in for signs, right?
Yeah, we could have this conversation all over again. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe there will be another one.
What happens if the planning board does decide they're gonna take some sort of global signage strategy for this? If they're stuck with what we decide tonight, they may wanna decide, well, we don't want.
They're stuck with our approval. They're not necessarily stuck, I don't think, with the design of the sign. Although if they change it,
Go ahead, Chris, I'm sorry.
it would have to come back to us.
If they change, right, but the square footage would still be, they're
Right.
stuck with whatever we say on square footage.
Yes, yeah. But I think if they
And as much as I like to stick the planning board with.
Now,
Trying
let's
to
not
watch my
start
words.
that.
Not in a minute.
This is being recorded for later viewing
Good sport.
and training purposes.
Future zoning board member.
Yeah, right, yeah. If ever there are any. So, well, what about the suggestion that, that we just heard about making a yay or nay on the proposal that we have right here, and then making a request to the planning board, planning department, I guess is how we would do it, that the planning board come back to us with some kind of direction, if there's any available, before we see more signs on this property.
Can I just ask the applicant, I mean, so I.
Yeah, sure, this is a free-for-all.
I understand Ted's point that, we want to ask the planning board, but I mean, you obviously have a vision years into the future as to what all these future there's gonna be more structures, Wendy's, who knows what. I mean, is your thinking that their signs are all gonna comply with the code, but the Market Basket sign is the only one that's gonna need a variance? I mean, you must have given thought to what all the signage is gonna look like.
I honestly haven't, but they are all much smaller buildings, so I would expect that they, Wendy's is a Wendy's. They know what their signage is. In fact, we showed it on elevations at Psych Plan, so I would assume that those signs already fit into the ordinance, that they've read the ordinance and know what size sign. This is a really large structure, so that's part of the reason why they end up with such a small sign versus a big structure. But no, we don't have any plans, and that was sort of the problem of how do you do a master sign plan when you don't know what your tenants are, and you don't know what's coming.
Okay.
And that's why we needed to have that conversation.
What about the state liquor store? Have they got a plan yet or not?
They're exempt.
They are, okay. Yeah.
They went through ADR yesterday, and you showed them the signs, but they are exempt.
Yeah, I've been through that process.
Yep.
Okay, well, let's see if we can move off the dime here. Do I hear a motion of any sort with regard to the specific request we see before us?
I'll move approval on items 1 and 2 for case 6321.
Lost my agenda, it's on here somewhere. Okay.
Second.
Okay, so this is 6321, items 1 and 2. We have a motion to approve the signs on the assumption, or the finding that the situation is unique and that this is a reasonable use given the scale of the buildings and the wayfinding needs of the property. Is that a fair statement?
Correct.
Okay, and is that consistent with the second?
Correct.
All right, any discussion?
Yeah, I'll go along with it on this, with a couple of conditions. We're probably gonna ask after this that we communicate with the planning board and this other thing, but if you didn't mention already, I think that because of the building is so deep into the property, it's reasonable for the signage to be bigger, which I think catches up with something you said, Ted, as more buildings come in closer, it'll at least give us some cover to say, you know, address the Me Tooism when we see it.
Okay. All right.
If Wendy's is watching, they've been warned.
Well, it sounds like they're already good to go. They're going to be making hamburgers under their sign.
They'll be back.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The variances are granted. Okay, now, do we wish to, I don't know whether it requires a motion or not. I suppose it would be helpful if it did. Would anyone care to formulate a motion for a request to the planning department, or to the planning board through the planning department, to give us some guidance, if at all possible, on the overall signage expectations for this property before we see any other requests for variances? I don't know if that's going to come to anything or not. It very well might not.
Yeah, the more I'm thinking about it, it's probably not going to amount to much.
Because if
Because
others...
if they don't know, how's the planning board going to know?
Right,
how
they're
to-
not. And so are we wasting our time by doing that? Do we want to do it?
Who determined that there needed to be this signage strategy? Was it?
It's
like,
written
the
into
city
the-
council do it when they approved something, or?
It's written in the ordinance, I think, isn't it?
Right.
Yeah, South City
So
Council.
it's not unique to this piece of property, it's
No.
any development of
But when
this-
they did that, it sounded like a nice idea. And then nobody's actually ever tried to do it, is what I'm hearing from Carlos. So we could ask for that. I suspect that until somebody comes back to us, we're not part of the equation anymore. So in the event that other tenants come along and comply as far as code enforcement is concerned with the sign ordinance for whatever reason, then it's not our problem.
Let's see it.
It's only if they decide they want a bigger sign that it comes to us and we can ask that question.
Well,
So do
I'm
we?
sure the developer and the sign company will tell them what we think, right, before they.
Yeah, plus they can watch this on TV. So do we want to do that, or do we want to keep it simple and move on to the next case, which is about signs on this property? Just in case you were wondering.
I would say let's go on to the next case, and then we can take up that discussion after the,
Okay. The next case is 6421 Barlow Signs for Interchange Development, LLC, 1 Whitney Road, GWP Gateway Performance District. The applicant seeks approval to install a freestanding sign containing tenant building signs which exceed the maximum size allowed by Article 2869A, Table of Maximum Sign Dimensions for non-residential districts, which will require the following variances. A table of maximum sign dimensions for non-residential districts to install a freestanding pylon sign containing 190.66 square feet of sign area where only 150 are allowed, and to install a freestanding sign with a setback of 0 feet where a setback of any lot from any lot line of 5 feet is required, and to allow an electronic message center which is prohibited. Would you like to fill us in on this one, please?
Yes. Could you please read that letter from Carlos?
I'd be happy to.
We have a copy we can give them, don't we?
We can do both.
Yeah.
I think they want it in the record.
What I'm going to do is read you the paragraph on electronic messaging centers, because that's the one that pertains here. Although not directly related to any case you have before you this evening, the city is also aware that the ZBA has granted a limited number of variances for electronic message centers in the past few years. The newer members of the ZBA may not be familiar with the history behind this issue, but the city worked very hard and spent considerable resources at the direction of City Council to fight EMCs all the way to the New Hampshire Supreme Court and the U.S. Federal Court. The city prevailed in both those venues, and our win became a landmark national case for communities seeking to strengthen their sign regulations, particularly relative to EMCs. This is the reason why Concord does not have the type or prevalence of EMCs displaying messages you might find in other cities. The current City Council has not given staff any indication that it wants to deviate from the decision of the New Hampshire Supreme Court and Federal Court to now allow for EMCs. I share this information with you simply to provide some background. Should you have any additional questions, I'm happy to follow up or meet with the board. And that's the substance of it. So, tell us about the application that you're making now.
All right, so again, for the record, my name is Brandon Courier from Barlow Signs, here representing Interchange Development.
I wouldn't blame you if you changed your name by now. And but go right ahead, Mr. Courier.
All right, so again, accompanied by Lori, as well as Kevin from Global Partners, the gas station there. So we were able to update the rendering because, as you all know, the roundabout that's going in. So I wanted to provide you guys with the most recent. We were able to capture a similar guardrail from another location in the city, and it's going to be the exact guardrail that's going to be used in place. So we were able to create a simulation of what this would look like.
Can I just interrupt, because I don't know the details about the roundabout, so if you wouldn't mind.
Yes. Yeah, I will. I'll go through that all.
Thanks.
So this is the roundabout guardrail we're talking about,
Yes. Yep. Again, just a simulation that's obviously
Which
has not been started yet.
figures on your reasons for requesting a variance in this case.
Yes.
Okay.
All right, so this evening, we're seeking relief for 3 portions of this monument sign. Currently, this area is under construction to install a new roundabout to aid with the flow of traffic. The current mobile station sign will be removed in the process, and we'll be incorporating it into our new proposed sign here. This method will produce a number of signs, a clean and up-look front to this roundabout. There's been a lot of time and thought put into this sign proposed, including the clearance from the bottom so the sign can be seen over the guardrail as depicted on the screen. The monument sign layout will have enough space for all of the tenants, current tenants and future tenants, and then even with the 4 tenants in the bottom corner, the sizes will still be large enough to be seen from a distance of about 50 feet with clear view. So for the first portion of this case is to allow total square footage of amount of 190.66 where 150 is allowed. We have designed this sign with safety in mind. Since the code does not speak to a development of this size, we've kept the square footage as close as possible while keeping the wayfinding public safe and informed. We have an additional 40 square feet that we're seeking relief for, so it's going to allow, again, like I mentioned, safety as well as the identity for all of the tenants within this new development. This point brings us on to the second part of this case, a sign of a 0-foot setback where 5 is required. With the addition of the roundabout, it will require the location of the sign to be pushed back significantly. If you look at the 3rd page, there is a site plan, and on that site plan you'll see a red box. Inside of that red box you'll see another red box, and that shows the existing sign, and then you'll see the new proposed sign off to the side.
The existing sign is in what will be the road.
Correct. Okay. You might have to go back to the original application. Yep, there we go. All right, so as I just mentioned, it's going to be pushed back significantly. So on the first page of the drawing, you can see from the curb There's about a 5-foot, 5-inch section of grass, then there's an 8-foot sidewalk, and then there's a 40-inch guardrail that's going to be in front of that sign. After that guardrail, the grade drops rapidly into a drainage. That would cause a sign to be too far away and too far down, which could cause confusion with motorists and wayfinding public. The placement of this sign in no way will be blocking vision of motorists entering, exiting, or traveling through the roundabout, which eliminates any hazards or dangerous situations, again, for the motorists. And that brings me to our final point here of the gas price changers on this sign. With the location change, it has put the sign in an area, makes it very dangerous for employees to change the prices of the gas. With the old sign set up at this location, an employee would have to bring out some sort of ladder to go over that 40-inch guardrail, and that doesn't even speak to the winter when they're going to have to deal with shoveling snow and ice, and then having to deal with traffic coming through the roundabout. So it puts the employee in a very dangerous situation. We're proposing a simple solution that can be changed remotely. Identical to a time and temperature, which is approved throughout the city. These use a grouping of LEDs set up in an 8 pattern that can only show numbers in one single color. The firmware does not allow any animation or anything resembling a message board that was previously mentioned. This technology is very different from the boards that you see on front of the theaters and so forth on North Main. So in closing, we have a sign of this size with a setback of 0 with negative effect on the surrounding area, especially since it's in a very industrial zone and separate from much of everything else. This sign will increase visibility and also increase the success of the wayfinding public. This, in combination along with the remote price changers, will keep employees and motorists safe to get to their final destination. Thank you.
Questions from the board?
I guess I should know this, but so obviously, gas stations all post their prices, and they manually change them?
Yes, so most gas stations, I can't speak to all, but most gas stations or message boards that have physical tiles on them, they have some sort of suction cup or a magnet that goes onto a pole. That's what's currently set up at this site.
Why does the price have to be on this sign?
Because the gas station needs to have some sort of way to identify the price, and I believe it is a law that it's supposed to be presented at the street.
But it,
By law to be presented at the street so the customer knows what they're paying as they approach.
okay. So at the street, the only place that could be defined as at the street is here as opposed to somewhere else on the site?
Well, we wanted to be able to incorporate it into one sign so we didn't have an overabundance of signage on the property. So we wanted to keep it as clean as possible with respecting the area.
Okay. Other questions from the board?
I'm just trying to envision, I mean, if I probably passed a million signs kind of like this without thinking too much about it. Is it typical, or are there other instances that you would have a gas station with changing prices have their sign as part of a larger complex of signs? Is that normal, or it seems to me like normally you'd have gas stations that have their own standalone sign?
I guess it really all depends on the development. We've seen situations like this. We've seen situations where it's an individual sign. But again, back to what I mentioned before, we wanted to try to keep the property clean. We don't want to have multiple pylon signs. We don't want to have multiple different pieces and parts. We want to make it look like it was a cohesive design. So with that, we'll be removing the old sign, incorporating it into our new proposal here, which we think, and we spent a lot of time on, we think is the best solution for this area.
But your other tenants, like obviously Market Basket, Home Goods, Liquor Store, and the other tenants, they're all going to have an additional sign, obviously, on their structure. But so is the gas station not going to have any other sign other than the pylon sign?
That's correct.
Because it's so close to the pylon
Right.
sign. Okay.
We're proposing one pylon sign at this time for all 43 acres. And this gets to where we were talking about the master sign plan. There was only one other location that we were debating, and this is why the question came up, We have one other location at Interchange Drive, which is our proposed second road. It's on that other plan, sorry, I can't point you to it. That we may put a small pylon there to just like a monument sign to show market basket deliveries and urgent care. They've expressed an interest in having a sign there, but it'd be very, very small and certainly within code. But that would be it for pylon signs. No other pylon signs within the site.
But is the gas station, obviously that's been there, that's existing.
Yep.
Is that gonna be on the same lot, or is that gonna be a condo lot?
It is on one of the condominiums, yes.
Okay. So, sorry for asking so many questions, is the pylon sign, which condominium lot is that on? Does the pylon sign have its own condominium lot?
Okay, this is where we're gonna have to get another.
Do you want them open the other site
Yeah.
plan back up? Can
No,
you-
no, there's a, well, yes, you can do that, yeah. Open up the other site plan, I
Yeah,
guess.
if you go
and
back
then-
the other.
And then I don't know if Ernie wants
Which-
to read the
do you
other
want-
letter.
I believe it's up on
The
top,
one that had all the
15,
buildings.
17. Yep,
Yep. So,
should be that one, yep, right there.
Okay.
okay,
So why don't you go up there and show us?
So the gas station isn't shown on this one because it was an existing structure, but the gas station is right here, diesel pumps over here, and gas pumps here. The existing sign will be right here. All right, so it's clearly in the middle of the future roundabout, so it'd be moved to here. When we submitted the request for the new pylon sign, there was a large debate within the zoning department, the code department, and the planning department over whether or not this became an off-premise sign.
Right.
And so they reviewed everything, went over the condominium plans, and came up with a decision that it was not an off-premise sign, because it's on the master lot. I think that was the right term. Ernie has a copy of the letter. Is it Ernie? I'm sorry. It's
Yeah.
Ernie, right? You should have a copy of the letter. It's part of the file for this variance, that this is not considered an off-premise sign anymore,
because
it's all on the same lot.
all the condo owners own
Right.
it jointly.
Right,
Okay.
exactly. Thank you. I'm not an attorney, sorry.
Any other questions?
Is it conceivable that the state liquor store could have their own pylon sign if they desired to do so?
I do not want them to have one, and I've told them that.
But they could.
I suppose, but it's my property. They can do a lot of things, but it's still my property, so I can tell them no, and I've already told them no, because they've put one in at Epsom, for example, the Epsom Circle, and I don't like it. And they have enough signage that they're proposing on their building. So I can't remember exactly what it says in our condominium plans, but we don't have any plans for any other pylon signs, except for maybe that one little one by Interchange, which is the second driveway, way down Whitney Road, so.
Other questions from the board? All set?
Yep.
Okay. Very good. Is there anyone who would like to be heard in favor of this appeal? Is there anyone who'd like to be heard in opposition to it? Any comments from code enforcement?
No, Mr. Chairman?
With that, we'll close the public testimony portion of the hearing. We have 3 requests before us. One is to have a pylon sign that is larger by approximately 40 square feet than the 150 square feet that's permitted. We have a request for a 0 setback, and we have a request for an electronic message center on the sign. We heard testimony that the height of the sign and the size of the sign are due to its relationship to the road, which is necessitated by the configuration of the lot, including its topography and drainage. The same thing is true of the setback requirement. We also heard testimony that the electronic message center is necessary for the operation of the business and the safety of their employees. Discussion. Nick, why don't we start at your end of the table, just to make sure you're still in the game here.
As far as, I think we ought to separate these, take 1 and 2 together.
Yes, we should separate 3.
Hey, Chris, I don't know if it's too late, they're gesturing like they forgot to say something, they want to add something.
Is there something?
Well, we just, maybe at the time that you discuss the electronic signs, if we have an opportunity to,
No, we don't do it
Discuss
that
that.
way. So
Okay.
any testimony you want to
Then we'll
give us, you
talk.
better give us now.
we'll talk now.
Okay,
Good,
so,
thank
thank you for that, I appreciate the clarification. So we do have a separate option, that we would like to propose. It's a scrolling setup system. So instead of having an actual LED board, there is an option that we could, have what's called a scrolling price changer. I can show you the paperwork here. And what happens is the numbers on the inside are able to be changed. It scrolls through, and the numbers can change that way.
It's
So-
mechanical, not electronic.
Correct.
So do you need a,
Would they need a variance for that?
That's what we didn't know.
That's what we wanted to question.
We've seen a case like this before, but I don't remember the outcome.
It's Cumberland Farms.
Yeah,
And-
Road, you denied it.
We denied it.
Okay.
Um,
So it does require variance? That's really the question.
I
Well,
think
not if it's,
that's not our,
it doesn't require a variance under the EMC, I don't think. Although Ernie would have to be the person, not me, to say that, but my initial reaction is no. I don't know that we're in a position to make that decision as we sit here.
Okay.
I don't think it's, I think we'd need to send this back to code enforcement and give them a little time to
Okay.
look at it.
it have to be noticed too?
If it requires a variance, yeah, probably, it's enough of a change, so it would need to be noticed. If it doesn't require a variance, then you are blissfully free of our administration.
Got it.
Thank you.
So I think that's where we'll have to put that one. Okay, so we're talking now first about, and Nick was up to talk about items 1 and 2.
1 and 2. I think certainly the request is reasonable in terms of, it's a slight increase on the square footage, given the number of potential tenants that they're going to address with this sign. And I think certainly putting it close to the guardrail with 0 setbacks was reasonably argued.
Okay. Jim, what do you think?
Yeah, I generally agree. I'm thrilled that zoning and planning could get together and figure out how to handle one sign. Maybe they could have done the whole property while they were at it.
I'm getting that sentiment
Yeah.
from the board, yes. Ed?
I'm okay with these 2 items. I don't have a problem with them.
I agree, as to 1 and 2.
I agree with my colleagues. Is there anyone who care to make a motion?
Move approval.
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. That brings us to item 3, the electronic message center. Andrew, what do you think?
I think that, all the points they make are valid, and in this day and age, it strikes me as kind of preposterous that people out there with poles, moving numbers around, especially in the middle of the winter. However, I don't see how this would be different than what any gas station could come in and argue. And I think that this is something that should be decided at the city level, where the city can look at the ordinance and say, we can figure out a way to tastefully allow for electronic or whatever you want to call this, that they presented, to be done, and it still be tasteful and not, look tacky, which is what the city wants to avoid. So I'm unfortunately don't think I can vote to approve it, because I just think that there's nothing different per se about this gas station than any other gas station.
Ted?
My recollection is the wording of the ordinance says that only time and temperature is permitted. Is that the correct language? Doesn't allow for any, and that's why we're here, I guess, to try to figure out if we're going to grant that. I'm skeptical about the electronic part of it. I mean, I understand the logic, like Andrew was saying, I understand the logic completely in terms of safety and hassle of, I don't know, I'd be more inclined to look favorably on this other device, knowing that it's out there.
And it may not need to be looked at. Mr. Monahan, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I kind of generally agree. I think we're bound by what's in the ordinance now, and in the past, we've urged the city council to take a look at it. This is in particular the safety issues of having some employee out standing in the middle of the roundabout with a pole with a magnet on the end of it. Seems pretty questionable to me, so.
Yeah, I agree.
I do too. I know that we have confronted this before. I think we're in a box on this one. This has gone through the courts, and the city council has specifically elected not to change this particular requirement. I think at least one occasion it came up and it didn't happen for whatever reason. And I think it sprung from our decision to decline an earlier sign like this. So although I just don't think we have any choice here. I don't think we can defy the city council and simply say, yeah, we love it. So I'm hopeful that this other alternative will work out and that life can go on without the zoning board's interference. Anyone care to make a motion?
Move denial.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded to deny based on no showing of hardship and it being inconsistent with the requirements of the ordinance. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The vote is unanimous. The item number 3 only, the electronic message center, is denied.
Thank you.
I believe that concludes our agenda for this evening.
Move to approve the minutes.
Is there a second? Is anybody here for that meeting minutes besides me?
I think I was here, I second.
Okay. All in favor? Anyone opposed? The minutes are approved. Any other business to come before us? Rose, we good?
We're good.
All right.
I'm sorry, did we want to
Oh.
urge the planning board to give us some direction on signage?
I'm not
I'd vote for it, or, you know, I don't have a comment about it, but I would vote if you know, for it.
Do we want to make a formal request, or would the board like to direct me to have a chat with the planning director?
I like the latter.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense, because this seems to require a little back and forth to have a more productive,
Yeah.
you know, outcome.
Why don't I do that, and I'll report back.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Maybe I'll get her to buy me a coffee. Thank you, gentlemen. Thanks, everybody.